In October 1994, at a lively college party filled with music, laughter, and the carefree spirit of youth, a young woman named Madison Ray mysteriously vanished without a trace. For 19 long years, her disappearance remained an unsolved puzzle, shattering her family's lives and haunting her small hometown. Just as hope began to fade, Madison's mother received an unexpected letter, a shocking message that promised answers, but raised even darker questions. What really happened to Madison that night? The air that Friday night was thick with the early breath of fall. The scent of damp leaves clung to the sidewalks, and a soft fog crawled lazily over the streets as students filled the quiet suburbs with laughter and the distant echo of bass-heavy music. At the edge of Meriwether Lane, a modest two-story home pulsed with life. Lights flickering through the windows, shadows dancing behind drawn curtains, and the unmistakable signs of a college party in full swing. Inside, the house was pure 90s Americana. Posters of Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, and Stone Temple Pilots clung to wood panel walls. A lava lamp in the corner pulsed red against the grainy furniture. Red plastic cups were everywhere, on tables, on the stairs, even on the bathroom sink. Cigarette smoke hung low in the air, mingling with the smell of beer and cheap cologne. The stereo, a bulky black tower of sound, blared Pearl Jam's Black, loud enough to make the floorboards vibrate. In the middle of it all stood Madison Ray, 19, confident but quiet, with a mind that moved faster than most. Her blonde curls were slightly frizzy from the humidity, and a black choker wrapped tightly around her neck. She wore a black tank top and faded jeans, rolled up at the ankles. A simple smile tugged at her lips as she laughed at something one of her best friends had just said. Aaron, tall and sharp-eyed, was wearing a white spaghetti strap top and a pair of Levi's that she had patched herself. She spoke fast, laughed louder, and always had some kind of sarcastic comment on standby. Julie, the third of the trio, had her hair tied in a loose braid, wearing a red flannel shirt and cut-off shorts. The kind of girl everyone instantly trusted. The three were inseparable. They had come to the party together, arm in arm down the sidewalk, talking about professors, annoying roommates, and whether or not Brett Montoya, the host, had a thing for Madison. I mean, it's pretty clear, Aaron said with a smirk, leaning in. He invited you personally. Madison rolled her eyes. He invited everyone personally. He's running for student government. Julie laughed. That doesn't explain why he offered you the guest room if you get too tired to drive home. Madison shrugged. Maybe he just knows I'm the only one here who won't puke in it. They laughed together, clinking their plastic cups in a mock toast. As the night wore on, the crowd thickened. Brett's living room was now packed shoulder to shoulder. Someone started a game of beer pong in the kitchen, while others danced in the narrow hallway. There was a moment, brief but noticeable, where Madison stopped laughing. Her eyes had caught something, or maybe someone by the back door, but it passed quickly. Aaron nudged her. You okay? Madison nodded, distracted. Yeah, just thinking. Julie leaned in. About what? Madison hesitated, then smiled. You know how sometimes the answer to a question is right in front of you, but nobody sees it because they're not looking properly? Aaron blinked. Are we playing 20 questions, or are you having a stroke? I'm serious, Madison said, still smiling. It's like people think truth is some big hidden thing, but sometimes it's in the details, in what nobody's looking at. Julie raised an eyebrow. Okay, now you're being weird. She's been reading Poe again, Aaron muttered. Maybe, Madison said. Or maybe I just see things differently. It was the last time either of them would hear her speak. At 10:37 p.m., Madison placed her cup on the edge of the windowsill. I'll be right back. Just going to the bathroom. She smiled softly and turned into the hallway. The moment felt completely normal. Not dramatic, not mysterious. Just another teenager ducking into a crowded corridor for a moment of peace. But Madison Ray never came back. At first, the girls didn't notice. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Julie checked the hallway. The bathroom door was open, empty. The bedroom Brett had offered her, untouched. The backyard, just a few smokers chatting under the porch light. Erin's joking mood shifted. She looked through the kitchen, then checked outside again. Madison's car was still parked in the driveway. Her jacket, the green corduroy one she always wore, was still draped over a chair in the living room. "Have you seen Madison?" Julie asked a group of students playing cards on the back deck. "Not since earlier." One guy shrugged. Erin grabbed Brett by the sleeve. "Hey, where's Madison?" Brett, visibly confused, looked around. "I don't know. I haven't seen her in a while." Panic hadn't set in yet, but the atmosphere shifted. Suddenly, the music felt too loud. The house felt too crowded. Julie's face paled as she walked into the garage to check, calling Madison's name quietly. By 11:05 p.m., the girls were checking every room, every corner. Madison's bag was still by the couch. Her keys were inside it. At 11:30 p.m., the police were called. 2 patrol cars arrived with their lights flashing, but sirens off. The party emptied quickly. What was left behind was a haunting silence, broken only by murmured explanations and the sound of officers moving through the house. Detectives questioned everyone, drew crude maps of the property, walked the perimeter with flashlights. Dogs were brought in the next morning. Helicopters scanned the woods nearby. Nothing. No signs of struggle. No blood. No screams. No broken windows or footprints. Madison Ray had vanished without a trace. Over the next week, the case consumed the town. Her face was on flyers, newspapers, TV screens. Evelyn Ray, her mother, stood stiffly at press conferences, her voice calm but shaking at the edges. "She wouldn't run away," Evelyn repeated. "My daughter wouldn't do that. Please, if someone has her, let her go." Her father, Calvin Ray, silent during most interviews, broke down on local radio. "If she's out there, if she can hear me, just come home." But days passed, then weeks, then months. Theories exploded, some realistic, others unhinged. She'd been abducted by someone at the party. She was part of a cult. She faked her own disappearance. She died in the woods. She never existed at all. In 1995, Brett Montoya dropped out of college and moved to Colorado. Erin transferred schools. Julie stopped speaking in public altogether. None of them ever got over that night. Investigators kept digging. New detectives joined the case. Leads appeared and vanished. Psychics came forward. A girl who looked like Madison was seen in Tennessee, then in Nevada, then in New York. Every time it wasn't her. Every time, Evelyn's heart broke a little more. By 1999, the case was officially archived. Evelyn sat on her front porch with the final police report in her lap. The words were sterile, cold, final, insufficient evidence to proceed further. She stared at the document, then folded it and placed it back into its envelope. Her hands trembled, her lips parted, barely moving. "I know she's alive," she whispered. "I feel it." She stood up, walked back into the house, and shut the door behind her. 14 years later, the town of Asheville had changed. New buildings, new names. Madison's story had faded into memory, like an old wound under a scar. Evelyn Ray, now with streaks of gray in her hair and deeper lines around her eyes, walked out to check her mailbox. She wasn't expecting anything. Maybe a bill, maybe a flyer. She opened the rusted metal door and found a single envelope. Brown, no return address. Her name typed on the front in all caps. She turned it over slowly. Her fingers hesitated. Her breathing stalled. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the page once. Then again. Then a third time. She gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in her hands. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just a single gasp. The envelope trembled in Evelyn Ray's hands as she stood barefoot at the mailbox, the dry October wind pulling at the edge of her nightgown. The The pale morning sun cast long shadows across the lawn, but Evelyn didn't notice the cold or the time. Her eyes were locked on the paper inside that envelope, yellow just enough to suggest age, yet the ink looked fresh, recent, written with deliberate pressure. She had already read it 3 times, and each time the words carved deeper into her chest. She is alive, but you'll only find her if you know what she knew. Beneath the sentence were symbols, a sequence of strange, angular shapes and curved lines. They weren't letters. Not exactly. But there was something oddly familiar about them. Something that stirred a dormant memory. Evelyn had spent 19 years scanning crime reports, newspaper clippings, anonymous tips, and hand-drawn maps. But never, not once, had anything arrived like this. This felt different. She stared at the symbols, tracing her finger along the ink, wondering if Madison's hand had touched the same page. For a long moment, Evelyn didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned, walked inside the house, and gently closed the door behind her. The interior of her home hadn't changed in 2 decades. Madison's room remained untouched, a shrine of preserved time. On the hallway wall hung the same photo from her graduation. Madison in her blue gown, smiling with cautious confidence. She was a girl who asked big questions but never boasted the answers. She was brilliant but quiet, private. Evelyn sat down at the dining table, spreading the letter on the worn wood like it was sacred. Her heart raced. Could it be a cruel prank? A sick joke? But deep down, in that place where instinct refuses to die, Evelyn knew the truth. This letter was real, and it meant one thing. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone knew something. Someone was watching. The next day, Evelyn found herself standing beneath the flickering buzz of an old office sign that read, Declan Boone, Private Investigator Discretion. Detail. Truth. The receptionist, a teenage girl with bubblegum pink hair and a nose ring, led her into a cluttered back room that smelled faintly of cigar smoke and black coffee. Files spilled from filing cabinets. A chessboard sat unfinished in the corner. On the desk lay an open copy of a crossword puzzle, half completed in red pen. Behind the desk sat Declan Boone. He looked like he'd been dragged out of a Humphrey Bogart film, only with more sarcasm and less polish. His hair was thick and graying at the sides, his blazer wrinkled, and his shirt partially unbuttoned. But his eyes, sharp, calculating, tired, flicked up the moment Evelyn entered. "You must be Mrs. Ray," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I hear you've got a mystery." Evelyn sat down carefully, clutching her purse. "I have something more than that." She slid the letter across the desk. Boone glanced at it, then picked it up, turning it over like it might bleed secrets. His expression didn't change much as he read it, but when he reached the symbols at the bottom, he paused. "Well," he muttered, "that's new." "What does it mean?" Evelyn asked. Boone rubbed his temple. "Means someone wants your attention, and they have a flair for the dramatic. You don't believe it's real." "I didn't say that. I said it's theatrical. Doesn't mean it's fake." He stood, walked to a bookshelf filled with strange old reference manuals, and pulled out a dusty black binder. Inside were pages and pages of cipher types, pigpen, et bash, zodiac variations, cult-coded symbols, even graffiti tags. "See here," he said, pointing. "Some of these shapes match a type of symbolic code used in underground student groups back in the 90s. Very niche. Almost forgotten." Evelyn's eyebrows lifted. "You think students sent this?" "I think someone wants you to solve it like your daughter might have, which, frankly, is the first clever thing I've seen in this case in years." Boone looked up at her, and for the first time, there was a flicker of respect in his tone. "You said she was smart. Maybe even different." Evelyn nodded slowly. She saw things other people didn't. "Then someone's playing on that." He pulled a magnifying lens from the desk drawer and leaned in closer. After an hour of comparing patterns, Boone muttered a string of words under his breath. "The truth is where the paths cross." "What does that mean?" Evelyn asked. "It means we're going hiking." The next morning, Boone and Evelyn stood at the edge of a winding nature trail along the French Broad River, a place Madison used to visit on weekends with her sketch pad. The air was crisp, and leaves crunched beneath their boots as they followed the worn dirt path under canopies of gold and orange. Boone scanned the forest with the ease of someone who'd spent years hunting shadows. Evelyn moved slower, cautious, but alert. They stopped at a fork in the trail. Two narrow paths diverging between thick trees. Where the paths cross, Boone murmured. He knelt and started examining the ground, brushing aside leaves with his gloved hands. After 10 minutes of searching, he stopped. Got something. Buried just beneath a mossy patch of earth was a metal capsule, no longer than a flashlight. Boone cracked it open. Inside was a cloth bracelet, green and frayed, with tiny silver beads. Engraved into the silver were 2 letters, MR. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. Her knees buckled slightly, and Boone caught her by the arm before she fell. "She was here," she whispered. "She left that for me." Boone looked around, his eyes scanning the trees again, but this time with different intent. "This isn't just a disappearance," he said. "It's a game." That night, Evelyn sat alone in Madison's room. The windows were shut, the air still. On the wall above the bed hung a painting, one she hadn't truly looked at in years. It had been one of Madison's last art projects. A simple portrait in shades of blue and gray. Madison stood at the center, her eyes half-lit, lips parted slightly. But tonight, Evelyn saw something new. Madison's finger was raised to her lips, not in thought, but in silence, as if she were saying, "Don't speak, just look." And suddenly Evelyn understood. Her daughter had been speaking through symbols all along. They just hadn't known how to listen. Boone began digging deeper. He built a map of connections on the wall of his office. Strings connected photos, names, campus maps, incident reports. 2 names stood out. Brett Montoya, the host of the party, now a quiet recluse living alone on the outskirts of town, rarely seen in public. And Aaron Talbot, Madison's former best friend, who had moved away after the disappearance and only recently returned. Boone visited Brett first. The man who opened the door was a shell of who he had once been. Twitchy, pale, with deep circles under his eyes. "I don't know anything," Brett said before Boone even asked a question. "That's not what your eyes say," Boone replied calmly. Brett trembled as he spoke. "I should have checked on her. I should have followed her down the hall. I was drunk. I didn't care. And now I see her face every night." Boone left without another word. Erin was different, colder, sharper. "I moved on," she told Evelyn bluntly when they met at a cafe downtown. "I couldn't live in the past anymore." Evelyn watched her closely. "You disappeared for almost a decade." "I needed to breathe," Erin replied. "Grief is a cage." Boone wasn't convinced. He pulled surveillance from the campus archives. He scoured old yearbooks. Somewhere, buried in all of it, was a link they hadn't yet found. Late that evening, Boone returned to the painting in Madison's room. He studied it under UV light. A faint mark appeared near the bottom right corner, a symbol barely visible. It matched one of the shapes from the letter. He flipped through his cipher binder until he found it again. And there, beneath the entry, a handwritten note jotted by Boone years earlier during a cold case in Vermont. "See related works in Galloway's Antiques, Asheville." He grabbed his coat. "Evelyn," he called down the hallway. "We're going antiquing." Together, they stood before the rusted metal door of an abandoned antique store on the edge of downtown Asheville. The windows were dusty, streaked with years of forgotten time. The lock on the front was broken. Hanging loose, Boone looked at Evelyn. "Ready?" She nodded, and as the door creaked open into the shadows beyond, a gust of cold air hit their faces. And with it, the scent of dust, wood, and something older, something waiting. The air inside the antique shop was still and dry, filled with the scent of aged wood, old paper, and dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. Evelyn stepped cautiously into the dim room, her heels making soft creaks against the scuffed wooden floor. Declan Boone followed close behind, flashlight in hand. its narrow beams slicing through the shadows that clung to every surface. Shelves leaned at odd angles, crowded with forgotten relics. Porcelain dolls with cracked faces, rusted keys, vintage radios, and glass bottles with faded labels. Time had collapsed here. Everything stood in silence, as if waiting for someone to remember. But it wasn't the relics they had come for. Near the back wall, partially hidden beneath a sheet of canvas, Declan spotted a frame poking out behind an overturned bookcase. He crouched down, lifted the fabric, and exhaled slowly. "There you are," he muttered. Evelyn moved closer. The painting was larger than she expected, nearly 4 feet wide, set in a warped wooden frame that had once been gold. The canvas depicted a riverside scene, most likely the French Broad River, based on the gentle slope of the hills in the background and the shape of the tree line. A group of students lounged along the bank, sketched in muted tones. At first glance, it was unremarkable, a nostalgic nod to college life in the early 90s. But then Evelyn saw her, tucked in the far left corner, behind a tree trunk, almost hidden in shadow, a girl with blonde curls, a dark choker around her neck, and a knowing expression in her eyes. Evelyn's breath caught. "That's Madison." Declan was already pulling out a UV light. He scanned the canvas slowly, the purple beam sliding across the painted surface in silence. At first, nothing, but then, as he swept it diagonally from corner to corner, faint glowing marks began to emerge. A series of symbols, nearly identical to those on a letter, danced beneath the paint, revealed only under ultraviolet. They were subtle, interwoven into the strokes of the grass, etched into the curves of tree trunks, hidden in the folds of clothing. Numbers, coordinates, letters, and one line of text, barely readable, hidden along the bottom edge of the canvas. Truth speaks softly from forgotten walls. Declan stepped back, staring. This isn't just art. It's a message. She hid something in here, deliberately. Evelyn leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as she followed the glowing trail. "What does it mean?" Declan's voice was steady. "It means she was trying to talk, even after she vanished." He turned the frame around and found the signature at the back. Julian Galloway, a fellow art student from Madison's year, a known recluse. He had disappeared from the university's records in 1996. Declan checked his notebook, scribbled a few cross-references, then closed it with a snap. "Let's go," he said. "There's a building we need to see." Back in the car, Declan explained as they drove. In 1995, the university shut down an off-campus gallery project. It was originally part of the fine art department, meant to showcase independent student work. But there were rumors about unauthorized exhibits, secret society rituals, coded artwork, that kind of thing. Evelyn frowned. "Are you saying Madison was involved in something underground?" "I'm saying she was close to people who were. And maybe she got too close to something she wasn't supposed to see." They pulled into a cracked parking lot behind an overgrown row of buildings. Ivy crawled across the bricks. Windows were boarded, and weeds had pushed their way through every corner of the lot. The building they were looking for had no sign, just a faded metal number above the door, 109G. Declan jimmied the rusted lock with practiced ease and pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick and musty. Empty canvases leaned against the walls. Old projectors sat in corners like forgotten memories. On the far wall, the remnants of a mural clung desperately to cracked plaster. Faces without names, eyes blurred by time. They explored in silence, flashlight beams darting across peeling paint and scattered debris. Then, behind a false panel in the back room, Declan found a metal filing cabinet, locked but brittle with rust. He pried it open and flipped through old student records, grant requests, project notes, memos from professors. One folder caught his eye. Eloquence, Group 7A. He opened it slowly. Inside were printed photos, grainy, poorly lit, but unmistakable. Students gathered in cloaks, some wearing masks. Candles lined the floor. Abstract sculptures stood in corners like watchful sentinels. Pages of what appeared to be coded writing were stapled together, most of them using the same symbols from the letter and the painting. At the bottom of the folder, a list, a roster of names. And there, 2 lines from the bottom, Madison Ray. Evelyn gasped. She was part of it. Declan shook his head. Or investigating it. Either way, she was close enough to be listed. He paused, then held up a second document. Look at this. It was a handwritten letter, dated 3 days before Madison vanished. It wasn't signed, but it was addressed to someone named Professor A. They've taken it too far. I try to talk to Julian, but he refuses to listen. The others are planning something, and I think Brett knows. If anything happens to me, look in the gallery. I left the answer where the sky meets the water. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. She knew something was coming. On the way back to town, Declan stopped at a gas station. While he was inside, Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, replaying everything in her mind. She looked out the window, and for a moment, she froze. Across the street, half shielded by shadow, stood a man in a dark coat, watching her. Their eyes met. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared. When Declan returned, Evelyn pointed. There was a man, but the sidewalk was empty. That night, Declan pinned up the photos from a folder across his office wall, strings connecting names and dates. At the center, he placed Madison's photo, her face serious, thoughtful, almost prophetic. The next morning, he visited Brett Montoya again. This time, Brett was already waiting at the door, pale and anxious. "I knew you'd come back," he muttered, ushering Declan inside. The house was dim, cluttered with books and unopened mail. Brett had aged beyond his years. His hands shook as he poured coffee. "I tried to forget," he said quietly. "I thought if I stayed quiet, it would all disappear." "Tell me what happened," Declan said gently. Brett didn't look up. "She came to me days before the party. She was scared. She'd found something about the eloquence. She said they weren't just a joke, that they were planning to make an example. I thought she was being dramatic." He finally looked at Declan. "She was going to expose them. And you didn't want anyone?" "I didn't think I didn't know they'd go that far." Declan stared at him for a long time. "I don't think they meant to kill her," Brett added. I think she became something else. A message, a warning." Declan stood slowly. "If that's true, then they left her behind. Somewhere no one would look." Back at Evelyn's house, she sat quietly in Madison's room, holding the photo from the gallery. Her eyes landed on the phrase again, where the sky meets the water. Declan paced behind her, thoughtful. That could mean a shoreline, a lake, or a place. Evelyn interrupted, her voice low. "Somewhere we went once, when she was little. There was an old train bridge over the river. We used to stand on the tracks and watch the sunset. She called it the place where the sky touches the water." Declan blinked. "Where is it?" Evelyn looked up. "North of the city, past the old textile mill." Declan grabbed his coat, without a word. At dusk, they stood together at the edge of the woods, facing the abandoned railway line that curved through the trees like a vein from the past. The tracks were rusted, half covered in moss, and the silence that hung in the air was thick with memory. Evelyn stepped onto gravel beside the tracks. She looked down the line, the rails disappearing into darkness. "I used to hold her hand here," she whispered. Declan didn't speak. They began walking, side by side, following the tracks into the forest as night slowly swallowed the sky. The fading daylight cast long shadows over the abandoned railway line, stretching ahead into darkness like veins of rusted steel and forgotten memory. Evelyn moved carefully, step by step, gravel crunching softly beneath her shoes. Beside her, Declan walked silently, his flashlight illuminating patches of earth and occasional glimpses of rusted rail. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate now, swallowed by the weight of questions unanswered, years stolen. and the haunting possibility that somewhere along these tracks lay the answer to a mystery that shattered Evelyn's life nearly 2 decades ago. Finally, after walking for nearly half a mile through the stillness of surrounding woods, they reached the old railway station. The structure loomed quietly ahead, a skeleton of faded brick walls and broken glass windows, its dignity stripped away by weather and neglect. Nature had long since begun reclaiming its base. Ivy climbed thickly over broken wooden doors, creeping along window frames, and roots from nearby trees had pushed violently through the platform's floorboards, splintering them into strange, jagged patterns. Evelyn shivered as she stepped onto the platform, memories suddenly vivid, startlingly clear, of afternoons spent here years earlier, Madison clutching her hand, smiling softly, curious eyes watching trains pass by in a blur of noise and smoke. Declan stepped carefully over fallen debris, his eyes scanning systematically. "If there's something here," he said quietly, "it'll be hidden." Evelyn nodded and began exploring, her fingers brushing against walls, searching for a secret she couldn't yet imagine clearly. Minutes turned into hours. The sun vanished completely, replaced by a pale, haunting moonlight filtering through shattered roof tiles. It was Declan's low voice that finally broke the silence. "Over here." She hurried toward him, finding Declan kneeling beside a broken section of the platform. Using his flashlight as leverage, he pushed aside a loose wooden plank. Beneath it lay a small hidden compartment, lined with rotten velvet and covered in dust. Inside, stacked carefully as if sacred, were old VHS tapes, their plastic casings grimy, labels peeling away from the adhesive. Evelyn took a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she lifted the first tape from the hidden space. Its handwritten label was faint, nearly illegible, but she recognized the date immediately. October 1994. "It's from the same month Madison disappeared," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Declan said nothing, simply held the tapes carefully, collecting them all as if understanding their gravity. They returned to his office in near silence, tension thickening the air, a mutual sense that these tapes held truths both had long feared and desperately needed. In the dimly lit office, Declan hooked up an old VHS player, the machine whirring softly. They watched, sitting close enough to feel each other's unease, as grainy black and white footage flickered onto the small screen. At first, the footage seemed innocuous, students standing in dimly lit rooms, murmuring in hushed voices. But as they watched longer, the imagery changed. Figures appeared in cloaks, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods. They stood in circles around candles, performing rituals Evelyn couldn't fully comprehend. She felt nauseous as she watched one student, obviously terrified, being blindfolded and led away. Declan paused the tape suddenly. Evelyn gasped, pointing to the girl on screen, the profile unmistakable even in grainy light. Madison's slender figure, her blonde curls illuminated briefly by candlelight. Madison looked uncomfortable, resisting slightly as someone gripped her arm firmly, guiding her away from the camera's view. "She didn't want to be there," Evelyn whispered, voice shaking. "She wasn't part of this willingly." Declan nodded grimly, rewinding slightly and paused again. Evelyn stared harder, feeling her stomach twist painfully. Standing at the edge of the scene was a young man she recognized immediately, a much younger version of someone prominent. Declan spoke first, voice grim and measured. "That's our university's current dean." Evelyn's vision blurred. Panic swelled in her chest, pressing hard against her lungs. "Oh my God," she murmured. He knew. They all knew. She stood abruptly, needing air desperately. The room spun slightly as memories collided violently in her mind. Declan reached out, touching her shoulder gently, but she pulled away sharply, fear twisting to anger. "How could they hide something like this?" she demanded, her voice suddenly loud. "For years they lied, and now these people, they're running everything, controlling this town." Declan's expression hardened. "I'll confront him." 2 days later, word spread quickly through Asheville. Dean Robert Lancaster had been found dead at his home, apparent suicide, though details were suspiciously sparse. Evelyn's heart tightened painfully at the news, confusion turning swiftly to suspicion as she met Declan that afternoon, noticing something unfamiliar in his expression, something darker. "Did you talk to him?" she demanded sharply. "What happened, Declan?" He hesitated, choosing words carefully. "I confronted him about the tape. He denied it, said nothing, but he looked terrified. Evelyn, he wasn't going to tell me anything. And now he's dead? Conveniently?" Her voice rose, sharp with accusation. "Who are you really, Declan? Why did you leave the FBI?" Declan's jaw clenched. "This has nothing to do with my past." "Doesn't it?" Evelyn interrupted bitterly. "You've hidden plenty yourself. Maybe you're just another liar, another person pretending to care." He stared at her, pain flickering briefly in his eyes. But Evelyn was already moving, grabbing her things, unable to bear another betrayal. "I'm done, Declan. I have to find her myself." She left quickly, not looking back, her heart pounding heavily in her chest. Hours later, Evelyn drove alone through darkness, guided purely by instinct and memory. She needed to escape the city's suffocating deceit, finding herself drawn toward the woods, toward the old cabin she and Madison had visited long ago, a sanctuary from the lies, where truths had always felt simpler, more honest. She arrived under a veil of darkness, the familiar cabin standing solemnly between tall pines. Unlocking the creaky door, she stepped inside cautiously, heart fluttering with bittersweet memories. Furniture was sparse, dust-covered, everything untouched. Yet as Evelyn moved deeper inside, she noticed subtle disturbances. A coffee cup freshly used, blankets rumpled as if someone had slept there recently. Someone had been here, hidden from the world. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Could Madison have been here? Was it possible? Night deepened rapidly outside. Evelyn lit a small lantern, the flame flickering weakly against shadows as she sat anxiously at the cabin's small kitchen table, unable to sleep or rest. Her mind raced through possibilities, questions multiplying endlessly without answers. She barely noticed the time slipping past, hours melting unnoticed into midnight silence. Then suddenly, a sound, sharp and unexpected. Footsteps outside. Deliberate, cautious. Evelyn quickly extinguished the lantern, heart racing as she moved quietly, hiding behind a small wooden cabinet. Her breath stilled, eyes fixed on the cabin's front door, pulse pounding her ears as the door creaked open gently. Moonlight spilled inside, illuminating a figure stepping softly into the room. Evelyn's breath caught painfully, her hands shaking violently as she peered carefully through the narrow crack between the cabinet doors. The intruder moved quietly, turning slightly toward Evelyn's hiding place, illuminated faintly by moonlight now fully illuminating her features. Evelyn felt a shock ripple through her body, icy chills cascading down her spine. The woman standing there had aged, her hair streaked heavily with gray, face marked subtly by time. But her eyes, Evelyn knew those eyes instantly. Wide, thoughtful, familiar in ways only a mother could recognize. Evelyn's voice trembled, breaking the tense silence like shattered glass, scarcely more than a whisper. "Madison?" The woman froze instantly, turning sharply toward Evelyn's voice, their eyes meeting directly now, recognition filling the small space between them like electricity sparking in the darkness. The moment stretched endlessly, questions hanging suspended in silence as Evelyn's heart surged with painful hope, grief, and disbelief intertwined as one, the cabin's shadows holding their shared past tightly within its secretive embrace. Evelyn's whisper still lingered in the stale air of the cabin, resonating with uncertainty and fragile hope. The woman with Madison's eyes remained frozen, illuminated faintly by silver moonlight that filtered through the cabin's cracked windows. For a breathless moment, time halted completely, suspended in an unbearable silence that bound them together. Then, without warning, the woman turned swiftly toward the door, Evelyn felt panic rise sharply in her chest and lunged forward, reaching out with desperate fingers. "Madison, wait!" But it was too late. The woman slipped through the doorway and into the darkness. Her footsteps hurried but surprisingly light. Evelyn stumbled onto the porch, gasping, her eyes scanning frantically. Shadows danced beneath towering trees, moonlight casting strange patterns across leaves and tangled branches. But the woman had vanished. "Please, wait!" Evelyn cried again, her voice breaking painfully. She surged forward, rushing blindly into the thick forest that surrounded the cabin, branches scratching at her face and arms, the uneven ground beneath her feet threatening to topple her at any moment. Her heart pounded relentlessly. Fueled by a mixture of fear, desperation, and the overwhelming ache of loss she had carried for nearly 2 decades. She pushed through the underbrush until her legs trembled, her breath ragged, her mind clouded by hopeless confusion. Finally, she stumbled to a halt, her chest heaving painfully as she realized she was entirely alone, swallowed whole by darkness. Evelyn sank to her knees, tears burning hotly down her cheeks, her voice lost in the quiet night. "Madison," she whispered to the shadows, "come back." Morning arrived softly, painting the sky with gentle hues of pink and orange, but Evelyn barely noticed. She had returned to the cabin hours earlier, numb and exhausted, to find Declan sitting silently on the porch, his eyes heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry," he murmured quietly, standing as she approached. "I never meant." "You lied to me," Evelyn cut in sharply, bitterness coating each word. "I trusted you." Declan sighed, looking down. "Evelyn, listen. My past at the FBI wasn't clean. I know that. But you have to understand, I tried to expose corruption, abuses involving secret societies. The same kind of societies Madison stumbled onto. When I found proof, they destroyed me instead. They buried my career, made sure nobody believed me. I thought leaving would erase all that, but it's always been there. Madison's case, it feels like my chance to finally make things right." Evelyn studied him cautiously, the raw sincerity in his eyes finally breaking through her defenses. "I saw her last night," she said softly. "It was her. I'm sure of it." Declan's gaze sharpened instantly. "Are you absolutely sure?" Evelyn nodded firmly. She had Madison's eyes. Older, changed, but I know my own daughter. Declan took a deep breath, clearly weighing his next words. "We can confirm it. I have contacts who specialize in facial reconstruction technology. If we use your description, maybe we can see how Madison would look today, verify her identity." Evelyn felt hope flicker once more, stronger now. "Do it," she said. "Whatever it takes." 2 days later, Evelyn sat anxiously in Declan's office, gripping her coffee tightly as the computer screen displayed a slowly forming digital image. Lines emerged gradually, wrinkles and age gently layered onto a familiar face, until suddenly, the likeness solidified. Evelyn's breath caught painfully. "It's her," she whispered, trembling fingers reaching out instinctively toward the screen. "That's exactly who I saw." Declan's expression darkened with concentration. "Then we know who we're looking for. I've been tracking records of false identities. One stood out, a woman named Elena Raines, working as a librarian in Burlington, Vermont. It matches perfectly." Evelyn's heart quickened. "Can it really be that easy?" Declan nodded slowly. "Sometimes the simplest disguise is the safest. But if we found her, others might too. We should move quickly." The drive north to Vermont was long, filled with nervous silence. Evelyn watched miles of landscape roll by outside the window, the weight of possibility pressing heavily upon her heart. When they finally reached Burlington, a picturesque town nestled comfortably against the backdrop of mountains, the tranquil beauty seemed at odds with the turmoil inside Evelyn's mind. At the small local library, warm light spilled from windows as patrons quietly browsed shelves. Evelyn stepped inside hesitantly, Declan close behind. At a desk in the corner sat a woman, quietly stamping books. Her hair was silver now, cut neatly at her shoulders, but Evelyn knew immediately. Madison. Her pulse quickened, yet she forced herself forward. The woman, Elena, glanced up with gentle politeness, showing no sign of recognition. "Can I help you?" she asked softly. Evelyn faltered briefly. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her, but she steadied her voice carefully. We're looking for a book on local history." Elena smiled gently. "You'll find that in the second aisle." Her calmness felt deliberate, carefully constructed, and Evelyn struggled to suppress disappointment. She lingered, hoping for a sign, but Elena had already returned to stamping books, expression carefully neutral. Declan touched Evelyn's elbow lightly, signaling subtly. He stepped forward smoothly, placing a folded note quietly on Elena's desk, a simple sheet of paper bearing the unmistakable symbol of the eloquence. Elena's hand froze, her eyes widening slightly before she quickly regained composure, carefully pocketing the note. Declan gently guided Evelyn away, speaking softly. "Give her time. She'll reach out." That evening, Evelyn's phone rang unexpectedly, shattering the silence in her motel room. Her heart jumped at the unknown number flashing urgently. Declan watched closely as she answered cautiously. A distorted voice crackled quietly, chillingly calm. "If you want answers, come to the White House on the Hill tonight. Alone." The call ended abruptly. Evelyn stared at Declan, her expression tight with determination. "We need to do exactly as they say. I'm not waiting anymore." Declan nodded firmly. "Agreed." Night cloaked the small Vermont town in quiet stillness as Evelyn and Declan drove along a winding, secluded road toward a solitary hill overlooking the sleeping town. Through dense trees emerged an isolated white house, old, weathered, partially hidden behind tangled branches, its windows darkened by grime and time. It stood alone, shadowed ominously beneath the heavy night sky, seeming to watch their approach silently. Declan parked carefully, cutting the engine, plunging them instantly into oppressive silence. Evelyn stared forward, breathing shallowly, the looming structure sending chills cascading down her spine. "You ready?" Declan murmured, sensing her tension. "I have to be," Evelyn replied quietly, stepping outside into the crisp night air. As they approached slowly, leaves crunching softly beneath cautious footsteps, Evelyn felt an uncanny sensation of being observed. The house itself seemed alive, pulsing with hidden secrets. Declan reached carefully for the rusted doorknob, twisted slowly, pushing the creaking door inward. Darkness enveloped them immediately, carrying whispers of forgotten stories. Evelyn hesitated only briefly before stepping inside, her heartbeat thundering loudly in her ears. Neither noticed a faint shifting behind a shattered upstairs window, the soft brush of fabric as a figure pulled gently away from view, silently observing the visitors entering below, waiting patiently in darkness. Evelyn's heartbeat echoed softly through her chest as she stepped inside the old white house. A thin layer of dust covered everything, undisturbed for years. The musty scent of forgotten memories lingered in the air, and the darkness seemed to press in closer, wrapping around her gently like an unseen embrace. Declan stood quietly beside her, his flashlight casting soft circles of light across faded wallpaper and creaking wooden floors. The room revealed itself slowly. On the walls hung countless paintings, each clearly handcrafted, their delicate brushstrokes catching the glow of Declan's flashlight. Evelyn moved carefully closer, her breath quickening slightly as the images came into sharper focus. Her heart caught painfully when she recognized familiar scenes from her daughter's youth. The old train bridge, their lakeside cabin, a smiling Madison blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Carefree and happy, captured forever on canvas. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she gently brushed her fingertips across a painting that depicted Madison standing by the riverbank, gazing thoughtfully into the distance. She realized suddenly that these images weren't simply decorative. They were memories, Madison's way of holding on to pieces of herself, of preserving her past despite the dark path she'd been forced to walk. Declan remained quiet, carefully observing each painting, his expression serious and respectful, as if understanding the magnitude of what this meant for Evelyn. "They're beautiful," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "They're clues," Declan said softly, eyes thoughtful. "Every image she painted kept her connected to you, to her past." A soft creak sounded from upstairs. Evelyn's heart leaped into her throat as her eyes flickered toward the staircase, half hidden in shadow. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, Declan following closely behind. Each stair groaned gently beneath their cautious steps until they reached the landing, breath tight in their lungs. A faint glow filtered from beneath a doorway down the hall. Evelyn moved slowly toward it, her hand shaking slightly as she touched the cold brass knob. Taking a deep breath, she pushed gently. The door swung open with a quiet sigh. Evelyn froze, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Sitting by the window, bathed in soft moonlight, was the woman she had glimpsed at the cabin. The woman she now recognized without doubt. Madison, older, thinner, her silver-streaked hair falling gently around her face, her eyes marked by sorrow and loss, but undeniably beautifully familiar. Madison. Evelyn breathed softly, stepping closer, afraid any sudden movement would shatter this fragile moment. Madison looked up slowly, eyes wide, full of unshed tears and long-buried pain. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, hesitant, as if the word itself was precious, fragile. Evelyn closed the distance instantly, wrapping her daughter in a fierce embrace, holding her tightly, desperately, feeling Madison's body shudder slightly as the tears finally fell freely between them. "I'm so sorry," Madison whispered into her mother's shoulder, voice broken with years of sorrow. "I'm so sorry for everything." "No," Evelyn murmured fiercely, stroking Madison's hair gently. "You're here now. That's all that matters." For a long time, neither moved, their quiet tears mingling softly in the stillness of the room. Healing wounds opened nearly 2 decades before. When they finally separated slightly, Madison drew a shaky breath, steadying herself. "You deserve the truth," she said quietly, her voice wavering. Evelyn and Declan exchanged a brief glance before focusing intently, silently urging Madison to continue. "I never wanted to join the eloquence," Madison began softly, her gaze distant, haunted by memories she'd fought for years to bury. At first, it seemed harmless. Intellectual games, art projects, coded messages. It was intriguing, but I soon realized they were dangerous. They manipulated people, played psychological games, forced initiations. It frightened me. She paused briefly, swallowing painfully before continuing, her voice stronger now. "When I decided to leave, they threatened me. They said no one ever leaves, that I knew too much. I didn't understand what they meant at first, but then friends of mine started vanishing, one by one. They were using disappearances as rituals, ways to control and intimidate." Madison's eyes darkened, haunted. I knew they were planning something terrible. I had to stop it. Brett knew, but was afraid to speak out. Aaron was too frightened to act. So I planned my own disappearance with someone inside the group, a student secretly trying to dismantle them. It was the only way I could survive. I had to vanish completely, or they'd find me. Evelyn listened silently, tears rolling gently down her cheeks. "You could have told me," she whispered. Madison's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I wanted to, every single day, Mom. But I knew it would put you in danger too. So I hid. For 19 years, I stayed invisible, moving from town to town, always afraid, always looking over my shoulder." She took a deep breath, steadier now. "But I never stopped watching you. I followed news about you, saw you pleading for answers. I knew you hadn't given up. When the eloquence finally started unraveling, someone who regretted everything decided to reach out to you with that letter. But the truth is, part of me just wanted to know if you were still looking for me." Evelyn reached forward gently, squeezing Madison's hand firmly. "I never stopped. In the days after Madison's return, Declan turned her hidden records, names, dates, and incriminating documents over to the authorities, triggering a wave of arrests that shook Asheville's elite. While investigators dismantled the secret society, Evelyn stayed constantly by Madison's side, determined to rebuild the bond time had nearly erased. Watching them quietly, Declan felt a quiet satisfaction. Madison had chosen to be found, and the mystery was finally over. Weeks later, mother and daughter settled into a gentle routine at their lakeside cabin. One peaceful sunset, Madison whispered, "I'm ready to live again." And Evelyn answered, "Then let's live one day at a time." Fade outs of that long-ago party reminded viewers of Madison's strength. She survived the dark and reclaimed her life. Her story closed on a note of calm resolution. Some enigmas resist answers, yet Madison's had finally found its end.